Let me switch gears, Alan. I got to ask you about what the president is talking about with regard to his attorney general. Ahead of this big week, the president came out swinging against Jeff Sessions. He said this: 2 long-running Obama-era investigations of 2 very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. 2 easy wins now in doubt because there is not enough time. Good job, Jeff. And then the president is basically referring to charges of 2 congressmen right before the midterm elections. Alan, your reaction?
Well, I don't think the president should be commenting on people who have been charged. We have to know what the facts are. One of them was charged by the Obama administration. The other one, the insider trading, was charged by the Trump administration. I don't think that the Justice Department should be partisan and should have a different standard for indicting Democrats or Republicans. There are rules about the midterm election, but these indictments came within those rules. It's usually a 2-month rule. So I think it's a misplaced criticism by the president and could be dangerous if, Democrats and Republicans alike started to try to politicize who is prosecuted and when they're prosecuted and what impact it could have on elections.
I think this is a really dangerous trend. You're right. This is a really important point that you're making. But, Alan, this is a bigger issue between the president and his attorney general.
Oh, I agree.
You know that. I mean, Jeff Sessions has been in place since the president began his term, and he recused himself from Russia, and as a result, in doing so, has been, unwilling or unable to get involved in any of these headlines. Whereas we know what went on during the 2016 election at the top of the FBI and the DOJ. We know that there was really no investigation of Hillary Clinton, and Jeff Sessions doesn't do anything about it.
Well, I think Jeff Sessions disappointed the president by not telling him in advance that he might have to recuse himself about the Russia. He never would have gotten the job if he had told the president that. I think the second point is when he recused himself, he probably should have offered his letter of resignation. He did offer a letter of resignation later, but it was at a time when it would be politically difficult. Right now, I think it's very, very difficult for the president to be seen as firing Jeff Sessions in order to influence the Russia investigation. Obviously, it would depend on who we replaced him with. Remember that when we had the Watergate, Edward Levy, the president of the University of Chicago, the former dean of the law school, was picked to be attorney general. If the president would have picked somebody like that, there'd be no criticism. But if he picked, quote, a loyalist who would try to influence the investigation, that would be perceived as somehow putting his thumb on the scale of justice, and it would not work well for him. I think he understands that.
But remember how long it took for so many of the president's appointments to actually get put in place because the Dems did not want the president to execute his strategy, and they were slow walking all the appointments. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, the president fires Jeff Sessions after the midterm elections. How long will it take for him to get another AG in place?
Well, it depends. If he appoints somebody with superb objective credentials, no time at all. But if he picks somebody that is perceived as perhaps wanting to slow down or end the investigation, the Democrats will do everything in their power to delay and prevent that from happening because they want to see Rod Rosenstein. But won't they do everything in their power
to delay regardless of who it is? I mean, look, we just said a minute ago that even before we knew anything about Judge Brett Kavanaugh, Chuck Schumer said, I'm going to make it as hard as possible for the president to get another Supreme Court pick in there. He just told us that.
Well, I think there's a big difference between a Supreme Court nominee who's supposed to be objective and independent and a cabinet member. The president is entitled to pick his own person to be a cabinet member. Remember, John Kennedy picked his brother. Ronald Reagan picked his private lawyer. Barack Obama picked a very loyal friend.
Well, how long did it take to get the CIA pick in there? Gina Haspel.
It's become so, everything is so political.
So
everything is so partisan today.
So you say if it's a clear, independent person, fine, but that's actually not true. They're slow walking everybody.
Well, let him try. I would love to see him pick an objective, independent, brilliant person of great credibility, and then he wins the fight if they slow that down. But if he appoints a partisan, then you're going to see partisan politics play a role. So the president plays a role depending on who he picks, and then Congress responds to that pick.
Let me ask you about the Twitter CEO testimony tomorrow. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, as I first reported, will be testifying before 2 panels tomorrow, along with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. She's testifying before one committee in the Senate. The CEO of Twitter will likely be asked about how his site polices users and content. What are you expecting to hear, and how does this end, Alan?
Well, nobody knows what the truth is. We need an objective, independent, expert commission looking into whether or not the social media do allow political considerations to impact their algorithms. I don't know the answer to that. We're going to hear no today from the people who have a stake in that. We're going to hear yes from people on the other side, and none of us is going to know the answer. It's a technical, highly scientific issue. We ought to get to the bottom of it by experts who are objective, who don't have a stake, and can tell us whether there is a thumb on the scale of free speech. We have the right to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, most people would like to see competition fix this problem, right, Alan, as opposed to a heavier government hand and regulating these businesses. But we don't know how this goes.
I agree, but we have to know the facts. The first thing we have to know is whether or not this problem exists or whether or not it's made up and exaggerated. I suspect it's somewhere in between. But we, the public, have a right to know whether the social media, which have such a major impact on all of our lives, are fair and objective. I hope they are.
We got the leadership of these two companies coming, but nobody really, in terms of leadership at Google. That's interesting. Do you think Google's going to be forced to testify as well? Owner of YouTube.
Oh, of course. Of course. Everybody's going to have to come in and testify, and everybody's going to remember what happened when the cigarette industry leaders put their hands up and said, we swear that there's no, nicotine is not an addictive. We know that we don't always expect objective testimony from the leaders of company. I think we'll get good testimony. Sheryl Sandberg was a student at Harvard. She's a terrific, terrific woman. I expect she'll tell the truth. It's not so clear that the whole truth, though, will emerge from adversarial questioning of adversarial leaders. I think we need scientific, objective truth so we, the people, can make the final decision.
Yeah, because they can say, oh, the algorithm does it, and that's who decides. But somebody puts together the algorithm, right? Somebody programs the algorithm. Oh, boy. Well, this will be something to watch.
There are people who can tell us the truth. Yeah.
All right, Alan. Great to get your insights, as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Alan Dershowitz joining us.